I am happy to be joined with the CEO of TAAT Lifestyle and Wellness, Setti Coscarella. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Shad?
I'm really good. Obviously, great to have you on. And what a performance. Share prices doubled pretty much in the last couple of weeks. I guess when you took on the CEO position last year, did you expect this kind of growth right out of the gate?
Well, I mean, you're always kind of pleasantly surprised. I think we came with a product that was timed right, given the market. And I think we've been able to communicate what the product is and its potential, I think, extraordinarily well. So when investors sort of hear it from that standpoint, I think a lot of them feel the want to go out and participate.
100%. Well, you talked about products, so let's focus on that. You're a company that's introduced a hemp-based substitute that mimics the experience of traditional tobacco, and you're forging a path down the middle between tobacco and vapes, if that's a fair assessment to say. But what kind of impact, I guess, are you looking to have on the bottom line of traditional tobacco and the smokers that are involved in it?
Well, ultimately, what we want to do is we want to give smokers a better alternative.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, where I think our product has a distinct advantage over tobacco is that our product isn't addictive. Now, what we've been able to do is create a smokable product for smokers that still tastes like you're smoking a cigarette, yet we can give you a far better molecule in CBD as opposed to nicotine, so that when a smoker has our product, they're still going to feel that sense of calm, which is really what a smoker wants to go out and have a cigarette for.
Right.
You go out and you have a smoke, you just want to kind of relax, calm down, a little bit of time for you. Now, the challenge with tobacco is you only get that feeling after you develop an addiction to nicotine.
Right.
And once you're in a state of withdrawal, which typically happens about an hour after you finish your last cigarette, you go out, you have a cigarette, and then you calm down. Not because smoking calms you down, but because you're in a state of withdrawal. What we want to do is not have to rely on addiction, and the withdrawal of an addiction to give you satiation, but we want to be able to give you something that would have the ability to calm you down and kind of give you sort of that relaxation you're looking for without that crutch of addiction, which is what tobacco kind of keeps going towards. And the same thing with vape, right? They're still delivering nicotine, which is effectively a useless drug. We want to deliver something that I think is significantly better for the end user, and do it in a way that is not going to be extraordinarily unfamiliar for them to do.
So available in the US right now only. You're selling within the state of Ohio. You recently signed a distribution deal with a company called Crossmark, which owns over, if I'm understanding correctly, over 100,000 gas station convenience stores across the US, correct?
Well, they service them. So they're a sales agency. So they work with a lot of brands you would have otherwise heard of. I mean, if you go to the website, you'll see they work with P&G and Kraft and Heinz and Mondelez and a whole host of name brand companies. And they'll go into these convenience stores and work with those stores to get the product placed, priced, advertised. They do an extraordinary job. They're basically an outsourced sales team, but they have coverage across the US. And currently, they're already servicing over 100,000 stores. So to get a new product into those stores quickly and effectively, working with a company like Crossmark is a no-brainer. Now, where I thought that, I mean, they've worked with tobacco before and other alternative products and have done an extraordinary job sort of delivering those products to the market through those channels. And that's why, for us, I think it was such a great partnership to forge, because they've walked that path before. They understand the product that we have, how to sell it into the stores, get it placed properly, and ultimately help us position it in a way that smokers are going to find appealing.
That's great. Well, in addition to Crossmark, I noticed that you just launched last week in a press release your e-commerce platform, which out of the gate had big success. You had over $100,000 of product that was purchased. Saying that, what advantages, I guess, does this bring for the company? Because let's face it, everybody's pivoting during COVID. the e-commerce level is, you know, at an all-time high, and there's no turning back. The train has left the station. But I guess, what is the long-term, I guess, layout plan, not only in the state of Ohio, but I assume across the state of, or not only the state, but the country of the US.
Yeah.
And then obviously executing the e-commerce platform.
Exactly. So look, I mean, the e-commerce was an important piece for us because it allowed us to satiate some of that initial demand quickly.
Yep.
So what we wanted to do is make it available for people who have either heard about the product or are in the process of hearing about the product that might want to try that aren't in the state of Ohio, so that they can go out and buy it. And I think we had a lot of initial pent up demand that we were able to satisfy after we launched. Now, what that also does is it allows us the opportunity to build some brand recognition and brand presence throughout the US, and then go in and backfill with the brick and mortar channel.
Right.
So while you're right that e-commerce is going to be a big part of a lot of companies' sort of future distribution mix, and it will be for us as well, it really is an exercise in finding the right balance between e-commerce and brick and mortar.
Yeah.
Because for smokers, they're very much accustomed to walking into a convenience store and buying a pack of cigarettes.
Right.
And we want to make sure that we change as little about that ritual of smoking as possible, so that the likelihood of people switching over is greater. When you make it too difficult or too cumbersome or too novel, then it requires a lot more education and effort to get somebody to make that leap of faith. We want to make it as easy as it is to buy a pack of cigarettes, to buy a pack of TAAT.
Right, exactly. Do you find there'll be any challenges, or are you experiencing any challenges when it comes to branding the product in the market?
No, I think one of the great opportunities that we have is we have the ability to create the brand. Right. If you take a look at some of the incumbents, right? Like, okay, you take Philip Morris. Philip Morris owns Marlboro. I mean, everybody's going to know Marlboro, right? But nobody working at Philip Morris today created Marlboro. Marlboro was created in the 50s.
Right.
Okay. So for all the people that are working on that brand, they're stewards of the brand.
Okay.
Right. There's a lot of brand character and a lot of legacy that and history that you need to maintain as you carry that brand forward. Where I think the opportunity for us is we can write that script from scratch. Okay. Right. When we started, TAAT didn't mean anything. I mean, I still have people like, what does it stand for? What is it? Why did you call it TAAT? And I mean, that's an enormous opportunity for us because we can make the brand what we want it to be.
Right. So what does that mean then?
TAAT?
Yeah.
Well, look, it's a 4-letter word.
It sticks. So, I'll say that it sticks.
Well, and that's really what it comes down to when you're trying to create a brand. It's a 4-letter word. People can remember 4-letter words. It reads the same both forwards and backwards. You can say it in any language, and it was available.
Right.
So, we were able to get the trademarks behind it and then start registering those across the world.
Right.
So from that standpoint, I think it's a great brand for us. And now we're going to build the character of the brand and what the brand stands for. And as we do that, I think we're going to be able to build a lot of affinity for the consumers that want to try it early, and then help them share it with their other friends who smoke. I think it's a fabulous product. I think smokers are really going to like it. And, from a value proposition standpoint, if I were a smoker, still, I used to be, but if I were still a smoker, I can't see why I wouldn't give it a shot, at least.
Yeah.
And the benefit of this industry and this category is that you don't even need measurable market share for it to be a runaway success, right? If you take a look at the U.S. tobacco industry, the U.S. nicotine market.
Yeah, to my surprise, it's bigger than ever, right?
It's $100 billion a year.
Yeah.
In the U.S.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes it's hard to kind of quantify the zeros in your head, but I mean, at that point, and in tobacco, they typically look at about a 0.5% market share as your threshold.
Yeah.
If you can get over that, you got a really good brand. Well, 0.5% of $100 billion US market is $500 million a year.
Well, I was just going to say that if you've got $1 billion annual industry, you break down the numbers, and your company, let's say, claims 0.5% of the current US nicotine market. You're looking at, like I said, $250 to $500 million in gross revenue. So how big do you see this getting, and what kind of potential should investors be aware of?
Look, I think this thing, it can absolutely run. I mean, when I first started, I used to tell the story about Juul, right?
Yep.
Now, Juul, I think everybody's familiar with Juul. Juul started in 2015. Okay. It was basically an offshoot of Pax Labs.
Okay.
So people who are familiar with the cannabis space, you'll know who Pax
Know who
is.
they
They
are.
do the vapor. Okay. Juul was born out of Pax Labs.
Right.
It was almost, I don't want to say it was an afterthought, but it was like a nice little side project. Nice little side project. And in about 3 years, that thing caught fire.
Right.
Not literally, figuratively. There were some vapes that caught fire.
Yeah, sure.
One
It
of them.
did catch fire though at one time.
Yeah.
What was it, 12 billion?
Altria in 2018 invested 12.5 billion.
Yeah.
That put a valuation on the company of 40 billion.
Staggering.
In 3 years. Now, you say, okay, well, that's a one-off. Okay, sure. Well, 3 weeks ago, there was another vape company that IPO'd on the NYSE called RLX.
Yep.
If you look at the ticker RLX, it's effectively like a Juul knockoff, sort of. I mean, it's out of China. They started in 2017. They're currently doing about 300 million in revenue. They're holding a valuation of about 35 to 40 billion.
Wow, huge. So let me ask you.
Same thing.
Yeah, as the Biden administration comes in, the Democrats are controlling the Senate. U.S. cannabis seems to be like on the rise tremendously here in 2021. And yes, it's like your product isn't related to cannabis. It's something completely separate, but still ties in with kind of like that category, that conversation. Does that benefit you and the overall company, you think, as the industry starts to unfold here in 2021?
Well, I think so. I mean, although we don't really position this product as a cannabis or cannabis adjacent product, I mean, it uses hemp, but we're able to process the hemp in a way that it expresses the properties of tobacco.
Yeah.
While still delivering the CBD. And I think that's an important distinction for smokers, right? There are other hemp cigarettes that exist. However, they're going to taste a lot more like cannabis than they will like a cigarette, other than that they look like a cigarette. So that was a big piece that we were able to solve, and we were able to put or at least apply for patent protection on that process.
Okay.
So while we use the plant, and I think easing the regulations around that category will be beneficial for us, I think we also have a distinct sort of path that we're positioning this in a way that would be an alternative for smokers currently. So yeah, I would agree that as those regulations become either more defined or less onerous, it'll likely make a lot of things easier.
Right. Last thing I wanted to ask you, which is probably the most important, what's the feedback been with regards to the overall product and the taste, and what do people say about it to try it?
Listen, the response has been really positive. I mean, I always find it interesting and fun, especially sort of when you're launching a new product. Like you hand it out to some people, they'll try it. Oh, it's pretty good. And sometimes you think, all right, they're telling you it's good because you're in front of them and it's your product, and that's just kind of what they're going to say.
Right.
Yet after about 3 to 4 days, when they're calling you again and saying, can you get me more of this?
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah. That goes beyond nicety, and that happens almost unanimously.
Yeah.
Every time I hand this to somebody, I almost unanimously get a call 3-4 days later. Where can we get this?
Right.
I let a couple of friends try it. They love it. Like, listen, that's exact response that you want to hear. And now that we're starting to get it into more and more hands in the US, we're hopeful that they'll also start sharing it with some of their friends who are smokers, and people will try it and like it and go back and buy it again. That's ultimately what you want. So, when you kind of go back to that market share example, that 0.5% share, that's 1 out of 200 smokers.
Right. Huge.
Right. So 199 smokers could not like it. 1 could like it. And if that's the case, you're in the $500 million a year range as you get sort of wide scale distribution across the US.
Which is why I think a lot of investors have caught on with that messaging over the past couple of weeks. Listen, appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us here today. You trade on the Canadian Securities Exchange under the ticker symbol TAAT, and as well in the US under what ticker symbol on the OTC?
TOBAF.
Okay.
And then on the Frankfurt as well, under 2TP2.
Excellent. Listen, appreciate your time. Keep in touch, and we'll be watching you closely.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad.
All right. Thanks, Setti.